like a cruise ship just went through the strait. So
Cruise ship?
yeah, a cruise ship just went through the
Like a
strait.
vacation cruise ship? I'm Shira.
Jordan, and this is the Quotient show where we talk about different mispriced prediction markets that have been identified by Q, our AI super forecaster, and explain why they're mispriced. And if you agree with us, you can go into our app.quotient.social, and buy those narratives. So it's kind of like QVC, but for mispriced geopolitics prediction markets.
So today we'll get into kind of two narratives in markets, specifically focused on what's going on in Cuba and in the Strait of Hormuz. And one other thing that we're going to continue to kind of circle back on as we're talking about it is both the narrative, so trying to understand like what's actually happening in the world, and also around the market. It really is a question with resolution criteria. And in order to trade well, you really need to understand both. But first, we're going to start with our fun segment called Would You Trade It? So how this segment works is we're both coming into this blind. So we have no idea what the other person is going to show. And then we're just going to kind of go through it and discuss whether or not we would trade it. So Jordan, why don't you go first?
So since you have a background in finance, I'm wondering who you think the lead bank for SpaceX's IPO is. And I chose it because I looked at these names and I'm like, wow, they're just so boomer. Like, how could Morgan Stanley do the IPO for the most like innovative company in the world? But yeah, I'm curious to see what you think.
You were expecting like a neobank to be there, like
Yeah, I was expecting like Euribor, which is Peter Thiel's bank for entrepreneurs and founders.
it's funny that you think that it's so boomer. I think of it as like legit peeps that really have experience doing this. And so if I was Elon, I would want the people with the best experience to help me take my company public. So I'm not surprised to see these names. I mean, I don't really know kind of what the like expertise at each of these banks are.
Got it. So you probably wouldn't trade this one.
Yeah, I wouldn't trade it yet without doing some research. Who do you think? Did you do research
I
on
have
it?
no idea.
Okay. Okay. So as a reminder, this is a fun segment, Jordan. So I hope next episode you step it up.
Okay.
So I'll now do mine. Okay. So
Yes.
let me do the setup. Let me do the setup. Okay. So Trump is speaking at Turning Point USA rally in Phoenix today. And the market is like, will Trump dance during the event? So, okay. So Polymarket gives it a 75% chance. Yes. The resolution criteria is that it has to be deliberate, rhythmic body movement, swaying, stepping, the coordinated hand motions. Casual gesturing does not count. Clapping does not count. You know, Trump has a signature dance move. So he's big into YMCA, the Village People. I think the one reason why we could be seeing a no here is reportedly Melania doesn't like when he does the dancing, and she thinks it's not presidential. So do you think that that's going to turn you to a no?
First of all, it's interesting that this market has so little volume. Yeah, how is their relationship? Yeah, maybe he will tone it down, but it's so popular. Like people love it and he loves attention. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So
I'm not sure.
I mean, I'm totally a yes too. Like it's the exact event where he is going to do it. It's a young crowd. It's a rally. There's going to be music. I think we're definitely going to see some moves tonight. So
He's
stay
probably
tuned.
gonna be like, oh, my wife hates this, but I have to do it because like you guys love it.
Yeah, he's a showman. I think it's going to happen. Um, okay, well, so that's the fun stuff. So now let's get into where Q thinks the market is mispriced. So first, we're going to cover Cuba. And the market we're focused on, or the question is, will the U.S. invade Cuba in 2026? And Polymarket has it at 25%, and Q has it at 7%. But before digging in, I wanted to walk through the resolution criteria so we can understand how this market will actually resolve, or what will need to happen for it to resolve to a yes. So in order for it to be a yes, the US would need to start a military offensive intended to take control over some part of Cuban land territory by the end of the year. And the key word here is land. And so there's a few things that I think some people might assume count towards this, but that don't count. For example, so like a raid where forces would go in and come out without holding any ground, that doesn't count. If there's an airstrike, that doesn't count. If there's some sort of like naval activity or blockade, that doesn't count. And also, anything Cuba already controls today stays Cuba, and anything the US already controls stays the US. So Guantanamo doesn't subtly get reclassified. So that's the setup of the market and the resolution criteria. And just to give some context as to like what Q has already found, the White House has ordered military preparations for Cuba, and that happened this month. And there's been some reporting that indicates that there are military plans happening, specifically targeting a leadership abduction operation, similar to what happened with Maduro. So with all that in mind, Jordan, how did this start? Like, why Cuba? Why now?
The administration wants to control the Western Hemisphere. They don't want countries in the Western Hemisphere that cooperate with American adversaries like Russia and China. That was the stated rationale for part of the stated rationale for pushing Maduro out. The other issue is that Venezuela worked really closely with Russia and China through oil exports and allowing their intelligence services to operate out of Venezuela. So similar thing with Cuba, which is much closer to the United States, works very closely with Russia and China. They have military intelligence facilities on the island. And Cuba also is like one of the toughest intelligence services in the world. And another thing that's kind of underappreciated is that their military and intelligence personnel will like freelance for other countries. So like during the Maduro raid, a bunch of the people killed guarding Maduro were Cuban nationals. And after Venezuela, the Trump administration reached out to Cuba, started dialogue through back channels, including Fidel Castro's grandson, who is like a really prominent power broker in Cuban politics. And some progress was made. But one of the demands that Rubio and the State Department sent out was that Miguel Diaz-Canel, the president of Cuba, needed to step down because he's kind of like violently showboat, anti-American, pro-revolution, just like not someone the Americans thought that they could work with. And he was defiant, not stepping down. So now the use of military force is back on the table. The Department of Justice started laying out indictments against senior Cuban officials, which is kind of a way to warrant the use of the military. And Cuba is not laying down, or at least the Cuban president, very important distinction, right? The Cuban president says that he's ready to fight if needed. So now people are concerned about the use of force. And that's why this is in the news.
But
Like, what would be the objective there? Like, if the U.S. really just wants them to stop working closely with Russia and wants this specific guy out of office and to make some structural reforms, it's kind of unclear as to like why they would need to literally seize land.
If they did end up seizing airports or ports, that would trigger the yes, according to the resolution criteria here. But what you're saying is that doing that doesn't support the goals they have. Is that true?
Yeah, just like why would they do it? I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's impossible by any means. I'm
Yeah.
just saying like what would be the intent? What would be the
Yeah.
goal of seizing
Yeah.
a port?
Okay. And do you think that the president or Cuba that they would be willing to negotiate?
Yeah, they have been willing to negotiate. There's been talks, like there's some political prisoners that were released. The president Canal like begrudgingly made a statement about like, well, there's a bunch of US pressure and like we're gonna be forced to engage, but we're not gonna back down on our ideals. But there's the president and then there's the broader ruling elite and power like Fidel Castro's grandson that are like actively pursuing talks with the US. So my read is that it's more like this dude just doesn't want to go and that like this dude might be removed. I think that there's like an escalation ladder that you go up before we got to the point of we're seizing territory. I feel like that's a few runs up.
Do you think that the gap between what we're seeing on Polymarket versus what Hugh is saying is because the market's still pricing in some sort of invasion versus just thinking about it as a raid or extracting the president or some other military operation that might take place?
I mean, Polymarket still doesn't think it's likely, right? It thinks that it's
Yeah.
less likely than not. So, like, if you look at the chart, 10%, 12%, down to 8%, and then it spikes here. And what happened on February 28th? That's when Operation Epic Fury started, right? So after that, it spiked a lot, right? Because people were like, oh, like Trump may really follow through. He's really showing a willingness to use military force. But this jump is kind of like disconnected from the fundamentals of the conflict, right? And maybe Q is actually underpricing it a bit. Maybe it should be more like 15%, but there's still not like a clear pathway for like why the seizure of territory would be required versus just like removing the president from power.
Makes sense. It's actually helpful to look at the market and see kind of like those moments and then kind of tie it back to how we're kind of describing it. So, on to our second market, and it's a different kind of story. So, the one on Cuba is really about like what the US government is deciding to do. But regarding kind of the Strait of Hormuz and the traffic there, that feels more about like what's physically possible within the time frame of the market. So the market we're looking at is, does the Strait of Hormuz return to normal shipping volume by the end of April? And so Polymarket has it at 52, 56 and climbing, Q's at 2. So same as I did in the last one, I want to like walk through the resolution criteria. So for this to resolve, it's all based on kind of what's going on at the IMF port watch. And it needs to publish a 7-day moving average of 60 or more transit calls for any single date before April 30th. So that's roughly 420 ships in a single week. And so the bar is pretty high to get that traffic up from where it is now. And the time frame in which to do that is pretty short. And the current daily transits hover around 15 vessels, and there's like a huge backlog. There's also a lot of unclear mines and dual military blockades physically restricting that transit corridor. So Q really sees this like as just physically impossible. So maybe just to start, Jordan, can you just like walk me through the mines? Like, what are we actually dealing with there and how do we get them out?
Zooming out, first of all, it's like, why did the market go up today? So the market went up today because Iran released a statement saying that the Strait of Hormuz was now reopened, but it wasn't open to vessels that were affiliated with their aggressors, and vessels had to go through a specific route that was in Iran's territorial waters, that they had to coordinate their passage with the IRGC Navy, and that they would have to potentially coordinate the payment of tolls. And beyond that, there's more chatter about a deal between the US and Iran to get a larger ceasefire to negotiate some sort of more permanent deal, potentially being imminent, like as soon as this weekend. And developments yesterday where Trump said that Iran had agreed to give up its uranium in whole or part, and the Iranians like kind of denied it. And then there was a ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel and Hezbollah that was kind of imposed from the top and where there's some violations reported. So all that is to say that there's like kind of a set of things happening that are suggesting that there is going to be de-escalation in the conflict soon.
Mhm.
What's pushing the market up to create this like really big delta between Q's forecast and the market's forecast. So, like, first, the question is like, does the conflict actually stop? Because if the conflict is ongoing, people are not going to want to transit through the strait. So let's assume that it de-escalates during this weekend. Then, like you said, there's the question of safely transiting through the strait. So there's like these mines, Iran put them there. They're not sure where they are. The US has to go get them. But like it's actually like not like a trivial task to like demine water. Um and the US used to have like dedicated ships for doing demining operations, but are retired, most of them. And now, like, it's the responsibility of like the littoral combat ships, which do a bunch of different things. And like one of those missions is demining areas with the use of like underwater drones and like helicopters and stuff. But it's like not a simple process. Like they have to find the mine with, you know, all this equipment and all these people who are doing this mission, like IRL for the first time. And then they have to send it back to like, Northern Virginia for some like analyst to be like, this is a like Shahid 4 mine. And it works like this. And I need to ask my boss about the best way to destroy a Shahid 4 mine. But the point is, it's just like they have to send it to some dude or dudette, and then they have to figure out what it is, and then they have to like propose a way to get rid of it, and then they have to get their boss to approve it, and then they send it back to the Middle East, and then the people there have to like get the asset that can go down and like destroy it. So it's just like kind of messy and it takes time. So like estimates of how long it would actually take to remove these mines are of like 2 to 3 weeks, assuming that, you know, nothing goes wrong. Right. So I think that the argument here is like, even if we assume that like everything just goes swimmingly from here and Trump and Ghalibaf like hug and become friends and like everything's cool, it still will take time to remove all of the mines. And if you look at like the IMF Port Watch, um, you know, estimates of like how many ships are like actually going through the strait, they're pretty low. So like a dozen went through, 15 went through. I think it'll be difficult even in the scenario where.
So we've been monitoring the situation. And at one point, you mentioned to me that the insurance provider for these ships was playing a part in this. Do you have a sense of what they need to feel in order to kind of confidently insure them?
Yeah, I mean, the insurance was more of an issue towards the beginning of the conflict because you need like insurance for trade credit. But like, the global like demand crunch has made that less of an issue now. The bigger issue now is like just safety and terms. So like a ship captain can kind of do what they want to do, but they don't want to lose their ship. So like question
Makes
one,
sense.
if I was a ship owner, like is some 19-year-old on a speedboat going to shoot an explosive drone at me? The second question they're going to ask is like, am I going to run into a mine? And then the third question they're going to ask is like, to what extent am I going to be extorted by Iran? And like one thing that people aren't like considering with the payment of tolls, it's not just like an inconvenience. Like it's actually like illegal to do transactions with the IRGC. They're sanctioned by the US in like 50 different ways. So if you send money to, for instance, a cryptocurrency address that belongs to the IRGC Navy, that's that could expose you to sanctions risk. I think the reality is that there's always going to be certain people who are like willing to bend the rules, but yeah, there's just like a lot of risk in transiting the strait
Yeah.
physically, financially, legally.
If the, I guess, ceasefire holds, would Iran still kind of operating the strait as like a toll booth?
Like an Iranian effort to like claim sovereignty over the strait and allow people to go through it based off of their terms and conditions, which is like an unattractive proposition for a lot of people, but particularly the other people in the Gulf.
Yeah.
Like a cruise ship just went through the strait. So
Cruise ship?
yeah, a cruise ship just went through the
Like a
strait.
vacation cruise ship?
So it was like the Celestial Discovery, right? And it's like a Greek company. It's an award-winning cruise company, apparently.
I wonder if it was just stuck somewhere. It's probably been stuck and they need it somewhere else to like run their cruises. There's no way it was full of people. Like,
It's a cruise
no way.
ship.
Do you think that
Yeah,
there's
it was
something else going on
stranded in
here?
Dubai.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes
and then they
sense.
had to cancel all of their April trip. And they had to wow, they had to like begin the process of laying people off.
Oh,
No. Anyway, so
so it
good
wasn't
intuition.
some sort of joyride through the strait for some like adventure tourism situation.
Or an Israeli spy vessel.
Is that what you thought?
Nah, I
Oh,
was
okay.
kidding, but it is a registered cruise ship, and it went through the strait. My point is, like, ship captains have a lot of discretion, and,
Yeah.
like, there's a lot of money involved, right? So, like, if you're gonna get paid a premium for the oil that you have, and the longer you're out at sea, the more you're spending on your ship, you may just, like, make a run for it, right? With insurers, I think they would wait for, the US to give an all clear, and they would also wanna see signs that the conflict was truly de-escalated and there wasn't going to be harassment of the vessels. So, yeah, I don't know how big of a issue, like, the insurance angle will be at this point because just the demand, uh, is so massive,
For
the peak
oil.
of demand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, even before, like, the US was, like, kind of encouraging people to just, like, "Go through the strait, you'll be fine." Like,
Yeah.
um, like, don't worry about it." But I
Okay.
think that if, the US gives the all clear on the mines
Yeah.
and or is able to say, "There's certain corridors which we feel
Yeah.
confident the mines
Yeah.
aren't in," that
Yeah.
could lead to more ships passing through, but then that also kind of limits the number of ships that can pass through the already narrow corridor.
Just on your point about like the other corridors. So I saw a New York Times infographic around like ships taking totally different routes, like pre and post kind of the conflict. Um, do you have any sense of, because I was surprised to see that there were still some coming through. Is it that like kind of like longer route? What would need to be taken in this time period while the mines are still there? And could that slow things down? Which would be like another reason why the ability for the traffic to get up to normal levels kind of like
Yeah,
wouldn't
like
happen.
Iran is saying that you can go through this specific route and you have to like talk with us and pay us money. So
Yeah.
that creates one set of constraints. The other set of constraints is like, where are the mines? We have to remove them. So
Yeah.
different pathways towards the same problem that like the
Yeah.
strait could be reopened, but like how many ships will be able to transit through what is
Yeah.
reopened. And the other fun thing with this market is that like it's actually kind of difficult to track how many ships are going through the strait without satellite imagery, and a lot of people rely on AIS, which is like a signal essentially that the ships put out where they say like, "I'm the Marco 3 and I am flagged in Canada and I am a oil tanker." Or you can spoof your AIS signal so you can make it seem like it's somewhere else, right? You can turn your AIS transponder off, so it's actually kind of difficult to get an accurate sense of what's happening in the strait, without resources that most people betting in these markets like have, right? So it's just like kind of a
Yeah.
tricky thing to monitor.
So, sum it all up. It's basically that, like, whatever was announced today, like, even if the presumption is that, like, everything is back to normal and the strait is open for business, like, come on through, even if that were to happen immediately, the amount of time in which to guarantee safe passage doesn't line up with the timing of this market ending by the end of this month. So just how the physical work happens. Is that what you think the gap is between what Q sees and how the market is pricing things?
Yeah, like the general moving average of ships through the strait at this time of year is about like 100 to 110, and the market's asking for 60. So
Yeah,
like the question is, are we going to get from like maybe 10 to 15 ships a day to like a moving average of 60
yeah,
within 13 days
yeah,
when when the negotiations haven't been completed yet. Like the
yeah,
two sides are still disagreeing about what deal is on the table and who has agreed to what. Like we have to assume that happens, and we have to assume that like the demining operations go well, and we have to assume that the area that is open for people to pass is like big enough for half the usual amount of ships to go through.
yeah,
It's a lot, but 2% is really low.
yeah.
So
Really,
yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. If we're wrong about this, we'll have to recalibrate the
yeah.
model. But
Interesting. All right. Well, that's all we have for today. As always, you can visit our site, app.quotient.social, to read more about the narratives and see all the reasoning behind each market forecast, all from Q. You can also follow us on X at Quotient HQ. And we'd love your feedback, and we encourage you to leave comments. Let us know if there's anything else you'd like us to dig into, and please share with anyone you think would find this useful. And as a reminder that nothing we say here is financial advice. Always do your own research, and hope you guys have a great day and a nice weekend.